It's not often I get introduced by somebody as powerful and as fun as Josh is. I just met Josh today as well as he just met me. Josh, this is for you. Everybody here who knows or has heard of Project Appleseed, raise your hand. You're late to the party, pal. My name is Steve Branan. I'm the Ohio State Coordinator for Project Appleseed. I'm the adopted historian of Ohioans for concealed carry. They've been asking me back for 4 or 5 years now at this point. As Josh said, Project Appleseed's about two things. We provide field rifle marksmanship training, and during our breaks, we use the stories of April 18th and 19th, 1775. Paul Revere's ride, the events that morning on Lexington Green, the events at the North Bridge, the events on the British retreat back to Boston. If you've been to our events or you've been to prior meetings here with OFCC, you probably know the basics of the story. 1750s, British and the colonials fought the French and Indian War. Great Britain ended up deeply in debt. For the next 25 years, the king tried to pay off that debt by taxing the colonies. For 25 years, the colonies figured out ways to get around the tax and not pay it. Finally, in 1773, they had a little party in Boston. Sam Adams, Paul Revere, the rest of the Sons of Liberty dumped a whole bunch of tea in the harbor at Boston. Pissed the king off. Pissed him off so much that he embargoed Massachusetts. He had Parliament pass an ordinance that said the colonies are in a state of revolt and they are no longer under his protection. Sent General Gage over and demanded that Boston pay back the money for the tea. They didn't. No, he was silly to expect it. Hell, for 25 years they hadn't paid the taxes.
Checks in the mail.
Yeah, checks in the mail. There you go. King got impatient, ordered General Gage to suppress the rebellion with force. So, like tyrants always, he turned to gun control. Gun control 1775 is a little different than it is today. How did folks heat their homes? 1775. Fireplace. How'd they light their homes? Candles, whale oil lamps. How'd they cook? Open fire. Sticking a keg of black powder in your living room, good idea? No. Every town, every community had a powder house. So General Gage started a whole series of powder raids. Was stealing the powder and hauling it back to Castle William, which was the British fort on the island outside of Boston. Well, that led to the shot heard around the world, and that's the story that we take 2 days to tell, and I just told it to you in 10 minutes, if that. I titled this speech today, "The Time for Talk is Over. It's Time for Do." I got to give Dan Bongino a hat tip. I listen to him always, and this is something he says repeatedly on his show. Well, our founders reached the same point that we are now. Time for talk is over. It's time for a do. They'd spent 15 months between Lexington, Concord, and the Battle of Bunker Hill trying to resolve their differences with talk. Well, it's obvious that it wasn't going to happen. Separation became inevitable. During those 15 months, Congress, or the Parliament and the King, basically treated the colonies like a left coast liberal treats flyover country. Shut up, you rubes, just do as you're told. So in the Second Continental Congress on June 7th, 1776, Richard Henry Lee from Virginia introduced the Virginia Resolution. That resolution's core principle was, therefore, let it be resolved that these united colonies are and ought to be free and independent states. that we are now absolved from all allegiances to and dependence upon the Crown or the Parliament of Great Britain. Once they passed that, somebody had to write it. So they put a committee together. 5 people were on the committee. Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Robert Livingston, Roger Sherman. So who's going to write it? Franklin stepped up first and said, no way, I'm going to write it. I made a vow a long time ago, I'm not going to write anything that's going to get edited by a committee. Adams said, no, I'm too gosh darn busy because I'm serving on more committees in the Second Continental Congress than anybody else, and I'm not the most friendly kind of guy, and we need all 13 states to vote on this, and if I write it, it may hurt our chances. So the job fell to Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson was a Virginian, which was good, southern state, biggest colony, and he also had a reputation as a great writer. The first draft was presented to the Congress on June 28th, 1775, or 6, whatever. New Year's Eve, 220, 221, whatever it takes.
Good callback.
Congress went into what's called a committee of the whole, where the entire Congress went into debate to edit this draft. They made 86 changes. With every change, Jefferson sulked a little more and a little more. Each change, a little small knife in his back. He didn't say a word in 4 days. But he had a second copy of the original, which he kept for posterity just so he could prove later that he was right. Funny thing about all those changes, though, there wasn't a single one, not a single change, to the preamble, to the opening paragraph. The entire Congress spent all their time arguing about the list of grievances that followed in the Declaration. None of them recognized what would become the American Creed. 55 words. History would turn those 55 words into the strongest part of the Declaration. Abraham Lincoln recognized them. April 6, 1859, Lincoln writes a letter to Henry Pierce. And in that letter, he says, all honor to Jefferson, the man who in a concrete pressure of a struggle for a national independence by a single people had the coolness, the forecast, and the capacity to introduce into merely a revolutionary document an abstract truth. A truth applicable to all men and to all time. And in doing so, he involved in it that to this day and all coming days, there will be a rebuke. That rebuke will be a stumbling block to the very harbingers of reappearing tyranny and opposition. We all know those 55 words. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, and they derive their just powers from the consent of the governed.
Yep.
Only 55 words. But what words? Declaration was followed by 6.5 more years of war. Followed by a new Constitution. Then a Bill of Rights. So what followed? Well, what followed was an expansion to the West, success in the War of 1812. We survived a bloody Civil War. that put blood behind the statement that all men are created equal. We went on to build the most open, most productive, most successful, most fair, multiracial, multi-ethnic country in history. Doesn't sound like systematic racism to me. But something changed. As a 501c3 educational organization, I am not allowed under an Appleseed hat to talk politics. So to hell with the hat. Starting 120 years ago, good old President Wilson and his progressives said, hey, we're doing this all wrong. We've had a good 150-year run, but we got to change things. Government should be run by the experts, the academics, the professionals. Right. 20s were followed by the 30s, and the Great Depression. The first time in our history where the American people looked to the federal government to do something for them, to give them something, and that was because of the fear and the despair. That's where it turned. That's where we lost the connection to those enumerated powers. Because in that crisis, government ignored the Constitution and started doing things they weren't authorized to do. Follow that with the 40s and World War II, and more government power gets concentrated. Yes, we saved the free world, but government started to grow. The 50s and 60s was the Cold War. Just an extension of the 40s. How many here did duck and cover drills? Yeah. For the rest of you, back during the Cuban Missile Crisis, when I was in grade school, the teachers instructed us how to duck and cover under our desk when the nuclear bomb went off. Like that was going to do what he could. Good luck. The 70s, the 80s, the 90s. America's focus was still external. Like it or not, we're the world's cop. Well, during those 50 years, the left snuck in the back door. They infiltrated education. They infiltrated media. Because they understand one thing that we're just now starting to figure out. And that all politics is downstream of culture. They wanted to take over the culture, and they embarked on a 50-year mission to do just that. Championed ideas that undermined traditional family, the traditional Judeo-Christian morality, and they replaced it with a secular revisionism that we're still fighting today. They reframed equal opportunity into equity of outcomes. Meanwhile, federal government just kept cooking along. Johnson's Great Society still rolling, and more departments and more intrusion into our lives. So where does that put us today? Not in a very good place. The left no longer hides their intentions. They become so brazen that they don't care. They're willing to exploit any crisis if it helps them. There's no longer any doubt that truth is not a left-wing value. Just the opposite. They couldn't care less about the truth. We've always looked at the left and said, they're good people, they just have bad ideas. Where for 50 years, the left has looked at us and said, we're bad people with ideas. Huge difference. And since we're bad people, yeah, we can lie about them. We can get the Southern Poverty Law Center to declare them a bunch of racists or that they're terrorists, or we can trash them on the internet. We can tell lies about them. Doesn't matter. They're bad people. Economically, we're a train wreck. 30 trillion in debt and growing. Government in all parts of our life. Down so far as that the federal government tells each of us how much water can come out of our shower head and how much water we can use when we flush the toilet. The swamp in DC no longer recognizes any limits or restraints from the Constitution. All of our candidates have voiced that. No need for me to go on with that any longer. But think about this. 50% of our GDP is spent by governments at all levels. You take state, local, county, federal, add it all up, that's 50% of our GDP. Are we really free? When you got half of your economy being spent in the least efficient way. What do I mean by that? Milton Friedman had a famous economist, smart man, sorry he's not with us anymore. He had a very simple way to explain spending. The most efficient way to spend money is you spending your money on your stuff. Makes sense. You care about the price value, you care about the quality. Second best is you spending other people's money on your stuff. Don't care about the price, but I still care about the quality. The worst is you spending other people's stuff on, or other people's money on other people's stuff. That's government. Clearly, we've gone off course. Clearly, we've got to get back to our founding principles. And clearly, our founders are rolling over in their grave that we've let it go this far.
Yep.
That's why I'm calling it's time for dues. So what should your dues be? Well, number one on everybody's list, your first due should be to continue supporting OFCC in the job they're doing supporting our Second Amendment rights. What else might you put on your list? Maybe you write yourself a little reminder in your phone, and every Friday night it says, hey, email your congressman. Hey, email your senator. Hey, email your state rep. Get off the couch, quit watching NCIS reruns, and go to a school board meeting. Go to a town council. And notice how I'm focused on local things. That's because I believe in what Jordan Peterson has said. He says, you want to change the world? Start by making your bed in the morning. Let me translate that to you. If you want to change the world, start with something you control. You control your local school board. You control your local town council. So let's start there.
Except you can't go to the meetings because they're all virtual.
Yeah. Didn't say this is going to be easy. Support and stand up and speak for conservative ideas on social media. Yeah, it'll get you banned. I take it as a piece of pride. I've been banned. It happens. Ain't gonna shut me up though. Look to support the growing conservative alternate economy. Parler instead of Facebook. Rumble instead of YouTube. Gab, which I've kind of lost faith in, or the new site Getter. There's a whole alternate free economy growing. Find them, move your stuff there, support them. We will need our alternate economy. Finally, insist on election integrity.
Hear, hear.
I'll give you a quote from Joseph Stalin. Doesn't matter who votes, it's who counts the votes. Make your list. Promise yourself you'll adhere to it. And then apply Dan Bongino's 10-10-10 rule. Talk to 10 people. Email 10 people. And make sure 10 more people know where and how to vote. Remember, history is watching us. And history will judge us on what we do or what we don't do right now.
Right.
Dan Bongino says, you may be down, but you don't lose a fight until you quit the fight. You want proof of that? Look at Afghanistan right now and the Taliban.
Yep. Barefoot.
150 years. They've outlasted the British Empire,
Yep.
the Russian military, and 20 years of us screwing around over there.
Yep.
And within days, they're going to take Kabul back.
Yep.
They didn't give up the fight.
Barefoot.
Barefoot, with rusty AKs.
They fight like Democrats.
The problem is there's too much truth in that.
Yeah, I know.
So I want to challenge all of you to think about taking this pledge yourself. And for the support of our Declaration, our Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and our individual liberties, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, our sacred honor. You should all know where that comes from.
Yep.
It's the end of the Declaration.
Stand together or we're all gonna hang separate.
Yep,
How about we just don't hang?
that's preferred.
Right?
Ronald Reagan once said, liberty is always only one generation from going away,
Yep.
and once lost is rarely regained. I'd like to thank Ohioans for Concealed Carry for having me back again. Hope you don't mind. I went a little beyond the typical history-related presentation, but I think times today demanded it.
We loved it.
We're glad you brought the other hat.
It was good.
For my final comments, another Dan Bongino comment. Remember, you are the leader you've been waiting for. Because once you step up, others will follow. Great politicians, great speeches today, but you and you and you and you and you can be your own leader. Get off the couch and step up. I can put my hat back on now. When we get to the drawing, there are 3 envelopes over there marked RWVA, Revolutionary War Veterans Association. Each one contains 2 certificates for a free attendance at one of our shooting events. I urge you to select one if they're still there when you get there. Find a friend, come join us. You'll spend 2 days working on your rifle skills. You'll hear the story, the full story of April 19th. And you'll relight the fire of liberty in your heart. When April 19th ended, just outside of Charlestown on Charlestown Neck, it was about 7 o'clock, the evening of the 19th. This all started at 10 a.m. the night before, on the 18th. It's 22 hours, 22 hours from start to finish. At 7 o'clock on the 19th, on the isthmus leading into Charleston, there were between 12 and 14,000 patriots, armed with provisions, powder and ball, and they did it in 22 hours. That's without Twitter, the emails, radio, television, carrier pigeons, telegraphs. 22 hours they organized, and were organized well enough to muster and arrive on the scene. If they could do it then, we certainly can organize well enough today to fix our problems. Thank you very much.